Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. This is a response to Jeremy Heywood's report and William Hague's statement in the House of Commons regarding allegations that the British were involved in the Harmandar Sahib massacre in 1984. Now, this video isn't supposed to provide an extensive analysis, an in-depth line-by-line analysis of the report, because we urge everybody to read the report themselves, plus the supporting documents. There's some shameless, incriminating evidence against the British establishment. What we're going to try and do in this video is pick out some of the key elements and ask some really piercing, posing questions, which probably the British establishment won't be able to answer. So we'll go straight into some of the introduction of this report. The report was everything that it said it wouldn't be. They said that it would be extensive, they said it would be honest, it would be transparent, and it would allay a lot of the fears that the Sikh community have regarding Britain's involvement. This report, listening to William Hague's statement in the House of Commons and reading the report, this report was the exact opposite. It was limited in scope, it wasn't transparent, and it increased some of the fear and the psychosis that the Sikh community have with regards to British involvement. The report is really shoddy, it's shoddy, it's brazen, and it's shameless. And we're going to look at some of the key findings. William Hague was really smug and arrogant when he was delivering the key findings of the report. What was more galling to the Sikh community was the nature of his tone was that this was conclusive, this was the end, this was our be-all and end-all, and basically it was a closed case. Now, you know a report is really bad when it raises more questions than it does answers. So we are in complete opposite to William Hague. We think that this has to be the start of the investigation and not the end of it. As MP John McDonnell said in the aftermath of the report, that William Hague's statement and the report itself has all the hallmarks of a traditional British cover-up. But as we saw live on television, that this wasn't a very good cover-up. Initially, the fact that Prime Minister David Cameron wasn't in the House of Commons when the statement was being delivered, for myself and a lot of the Sikhs out there, completely denigrated the whole issue. The fact that William Hague delivered the statement already brought down how important this issue really is. Now, something like the Leveson inquiry, if we cast our minds back a couple of years, after the report was made, David Cameron himself delivered in the House of Commons the key findings and the recommendations of the Leveson inquiry. He was there. This was only a phone hacking scandal. We are talking about a wholesale military siege, a full frontal attack on a small sacred shrine full of civilian population, where more than 10,000 people perished. Did this not warrant the Prime Minister of the UK to stand and deliver the statement? We are told that this was an honest, transparent report. But we're also told, and William Hague said this, and we think it's completely scandalous, and it's remarkable that somebody can make such a statement, that the main report was destroyed in 2009. The SAS soldier travelled from this country to India, offered his advice, documented his findings, gave that to both his commanding officer, Margaret Thatcher, and the Indian establishment, and that report has been destroyed. This report was kept safe for 25 years, from 1984 to 2009. Why would it be destroyed 25 years later? This file essentially was the smoking gun. This file could have put all our fears, could have put all our questions to bed, but it's been destroyed by the Ministry of Defence. We see Britain as a diplomatic country with civil moral ethics. We don't see it like India that destroy its own constitutional laws on a daily basis. Why would they destroy this report if they had nothing to hide? The question we need to ask ourselves is, why did the main file, out of 23,000 documents, why was that one destroyed? And the destruction of this file leads us to a key point, which is what all Sikhs have been banging on about ever since the two documents were released, the secret documents in early January, is full disclosure. We've been demanding full disclosure ever since we've known about these documents. Now, William Hague said in Parliament, in the House of Commons, that the strength of a democracy can be measured by taking an unflinching look at the past. In the same breath, he has told us that they scoured 200 files and 23,000 documents to come to this report. What we would like to ask William Hague, what we would like to ask the British establishment, is that out of 23,000 documents, you have given us 5. This does not look like an unflinching look at the past. Further in the report, it said that our findings are based on written available documents. Again, another question we would like to ask is, what further documents are there that aren't available? Another key question that needs to be asked in this whole saga is that what is the nature of the other documents? Some of the documents and in the annexes of the report that we've seen, they are horrifying. Some of the statements that are made by the High Commissioner to New Delhi, that we must keep this secret, we must not let this secret come out, it will be embarrassing for the British establishment, India will never forgive us if this comes out. These are documents that William Hague and Jeremy Heywood have seen fit to give to us. If these horrifying documents have been given to us to pacify us, what other documents have they not given to us? How bad and how incriminating must other documents be if they think it's okay to give us these? What was quite telling during William Hague's statement in the House of Commons was the way he repeatedly squirmed out of giving an apology to the Sikh community. Not that an apology would apply any kind of balm to our wounds, but he repeatedly squirmed out of an apology. And this was his reasoning if you watch his statement. It's that our advice had limited impact. And our advice was there to ensure that there was minimum collateral damage, minimum loss of human life, and minimum damage to Harmandar Sahib. And how would this have happened? He said we would have used a helicopter-borne paramilitary forces to come down into Nanak Niwas, where Sant Pindrawale was, and we would have done a raid and snatch, and it would have been a clean, clinical, surgical operation where nobody would have died. What issues we have, and the questions we have, again, we put this to the British establishment, is that you could have just said no. You didn't have to engage with the Indian establishment in trying to draw up a raid on Harmandar Sahib. If the Italian president had asked the British establishment that we need your help to raid the Vatican and get the Pope out and effectively kidnap the Pope, would you entertain such a question? Would you entertain such a request? Was it not your moral duty to use basic common sense, morals and ethics and say no to Indira Gandhi? The SAS may have done a recce of Harmandar Sahib complex and they said that this was a minimal role, but it was a role nonetheless. And as Lord Singh has quite rightly said in the aftermath of this report, that is it right, is it justifiable, and is it ethical to say we had a minimal role or a limited impact in a Holocaust? As a diplomatic, democratic, civil country, and it prides itself on its core beliefs and values, shouldn't British advice have been limited to a diplomatic effort to end the political standoff through peaceful means in Punjab? And this is why William Hague was repeatedly evading an apology to the Sikh community. It's clear that the Indian establishment could simply have said no. But let's move on to the crux of the matter, Sant Janel Singh Pindrawale. The British were prepared to go to Punjab in an operation and snatch Sant Pindrawale from the Harmandar Sahib complex. The question we have for the British establishment is, who do you think you are to go to Punjab, to the heart of the Sikh community, and kidnap an officially elected head of a traditional historical Sikh seminary that was started by our 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, of which the first Jathedar, the first leader, was the renowned, profound Baba Deep Singh? Who do you think you are to kidnap our high priest? Tell us how you assessed the threat that Sant Pindrawale posed to the unity and the security of India. Tell us also, what supporting data did you have to suggest that Sant Pindrawale was engaged in any kind of criminal activity? It's clear from William Hague's statement that any attack, any operation whether it's advice, no matter how limited it was, any operation drawn up for the Indian establishment effectively sanctioned an attack on the heart of the Sikh community, and William Hague must be aware of this. Let's look at another aspect which seems to be overlooked by absolutely everybody, both our Sikh media and the British media. Let's take Sant Bhindranwale out of the equation, let's take Harmandar Sahib out of the equation, let's take the whole saga out of the equation. Let's ask this question now. Why would the British government engage with Indira Gandhi, a Prime Minister who in 1975 was convicted of malpractice and illegally using state machinery? She was found guilty by the Indian High Court and the Indian Supreme Court. Found guilty. She was also found guilty of bribery. Now, after being found guilty, this democratic leader of a democratic nation imposed an emergency in India, which meant she effectively was ruling by decree, which meant she was ruling India as the Prime Minister illegally. She wasn't an elected Prime Minister. Afterwards, she was found guilty and impeached for using illegal state machinery. She was removed from the lower house of the Indian Parliament, the Lok Sabha. If you're going to be a Prime Minister of India, you have to be a member of the lower or the upper house. If she was effectively removed from the lower house, it means she had no grounds to be a Prime Minister. From 1975 till 1980, till 1981, Indira Gandhi was ruling India in an illegal way. So let's take the Sikh aspirations and the political drama that was unfolding in Punjab out of the equation. Why would Britain trust and aid a Prime Minister who was ruling as a dictator for 6 years in an illegal manner? It's evident that the British establishment, more importantly Margaret Thatcher, was more than willing and more than happy to deal with a leader that was both morally and politically corrupt. In the statement that William Hague made, and in the report itself, he made a very shocking statement, and this was early on in his statement, which startled me, and I'm sure it did to others, that the British establishment received a request early in February 1984 to regain control of the Harmandar Sahib complex. Again, another piercing question for William Hague and the British establishment. When was the Golden Temple, when was Sri Harmandar Sahib out of control? And if it was out of control, how would you define it? What is your definition of in control and out of control in Harmandar Sahib? A question for you. Because some of the evidence that we have, that if Harmandar Sahib was out of control, it would suggest that pilgrims, normal Sangat, would stop going to Harmandar Sahib because it's held up by these nasty, deadly terrorists. But here's some supporting evidence that opposes what was said in Parliament, in the House of Commons on that day, and the report. Between the years 1982 and 1983, every Wednesday and every Sunday, 400 to 500 people were initiated taking Amrit every Wednesday and every Sunday between 1982 and 1983. Calculate those figures for yourself. 500 people, so literally 1,000 people at Sri Akal Takht Sahib every week for 1 year. In April 13th, Vaisakhi Day 1983, 10,000 people took Amrit on that one day. On April 13th, 1984, a few months after Indira Gandhi had told the British establishment, and they believed it, that Harmandar Sahib was out of control, on April 13th, 1984, declared by Sant Jarnail Singh Khalsa Bhindranwale himself, on that very day, 45,000 people were initiated into the Khalsa fold and had taken Amrit. 45,000. Does this suggest that Harmandar Sahib was out of control? What is your definition of control? At the same time, we have to realize by looking at these little figures alone that this was no fringe movement. This was no little movement started by a group of rebels. This was a revival of Sikh traditions. This was a revival of Sikh culture. And this is what had to be put to an end. Also, if Harmandar Sahib was completely out of control, and Sant Bhindranwale, as we're told, was an extremist and a fanatic, a terrorist who was hiding in the Harmandar Sahib complex, wouldn't a fear and psychosis grip a terrorist who's hiding somewhere? Would he not want to know that even if a leaf is moved, I want to know about it because I'm hiding it for my own safety? If Harmandar Sahib was so dangerous and deadly at the time, would the British establishment be prepared to send a lone soldier, a white lone soldier, an Englishman, to do a recce at Harmandar Sahib? Would they put one soldier in harm's way, which is supposedly flooded with terrorists? The reason why this SAS soldier was able to go into Harmandar Sahib and do a recce is because Sant Bhindranwale and the rest of the Sangat had nothing to hide. There were no extremists there were no terrorists, there were no indiscriminate killing of innocent people. Harmandar Sahib wasn't out of control, which is why this SAS soldier was able to walk around freely and make a judgment, an assessment, and patrol the whole complex at will. And it wasn't just the SAS soldier who was able to freely patrol the Harmandar Sahib complex. There are videos, there's documented evidence, BBC footage of Sant Bhindranwale talking to BBC correspondents and New York Times correspondents and talking about the issues that are affecting Sikhs in the manner that poor people are being tortured, arbitrarily arrested. Sant Bhindranwale is making these speeches to these journalists, and these journalists are walking free in the Harmandar Sahib complex. If this was a dreaded terrorist who was ready for a big bloodbath, why would he be so freely accessible to these journalists? Why would these journalists go freely to Sant Bhindranwale without any fear? Why would Sant Bhindranwale continue to address the congregation at the top of the Langar Hall, the apex of the complex, which is probably the most militarily vulnerable position? Why would Sant Bhindranwale do that? And it's quite ironic that the only time that journalists were banned from Harmandar Sahib complex, not by Sant Bhindranwale, not by General Subaik Singh, not by Amarik Singh, not by any Sikh organisation. Journalists were banned not only from the Harmandar Sahib complex, but taken at gunpoint to the border of Punjab and told to leave for a whole month by the Indian establishment. This is the only time journalists weren't allowed in the Harmandar Sahib complex, were when they were took away at gunpoint by the Indian government just before Operation Blue Star. Another important aspect to this report is William Hague said that the British government advised the Indian government that all political dialogue should be exhausted before military operation is carried out. So all political means and diplomatic means should be used before using a military operation. What we would like to ask the British government is, did you not have a moral duty or a duty of care if you were getting involved in the saga in India and in Punjab, to know what were the political aspirations of the Sikh people? What were their demands? What were the troubles they were facing? If you were prepared to go to Punjab and meddle in the affairs and kidnap a Sikh leader who was vocalizing the political aspirations of the Punjab people, did you not have a moral duty to know what those political aspirations were? In the media, it was peddled completely that Sikhs wanted to secede from the Indian Union and create a Khalistan. Even that isn't a criminal activity, not only because we were promised Khalistan and not only because we are a sovereign people and our gurus have told us this, but when the Scottish demanded a referendum on independence, I don't remember an SAS soldier going over to Scotland and doing a recce of Scotland and seeing how they can do a military operation if things get out of hand. The basic demands of the Punjabi people were water, were electricity, a constitutional reform, and a recognition that Sikhs exist in India, greater autonomy for the people of Punjab, and realize the federal structure that was promised to us. These were the basic demands of the people of Punjab. The British government not only should have known what the political aspirations, the social aspirations, the religious, the moral aspirations of the Punjab people were, they should also have been acutely aware of how Sikhs behave. The Sikhs that resided in the UK, how law-abiding, how civil, how contributing they are to the British way of life. Would the Sikhs of Punjab have acted in a violent, terrorist way to meet some basic human needs? This is a major flaw in the report and in William Hague's statement, and the British as a whole, that they did not ask, they did not even delve into the issues that were affecting the people of Punjab. So the question beckons, would the British government get involved in a situation without knowing what the context is, without knowing what was going on in Punjab, without knowing what the political grievances of the Sikh people were, without knowing how much civil disobedience and peaceful protest the Sikhs had been doing for decades long, would the British government be prepared to go to India and offer military advice without knowing this context? Would any of us step into a situation without knowing the context of it? If somebody asked for our help, would we not assess the context of the situation and the possible causes for it before offering a solution? And this is probably one of the most sinister things about the report, that the British government probably did know that Sikhs were protesting peacefully for decades. They were using civil disobedience to try and achieve their political gains. They weren't using violence. They would have known this. They wouldn't have stepped foot into that situation without knowing this, which then opens even bigger can of worms. Did the British government, knowing that repressive measures were taken against the Sikh people of Punjab, knowing that the police had been turned into a criminalized gang that were brutalizing the Sikh people at the behest of Indira Gandhi, knowing this, were they prepared to allow India to kill 10,000 Sikhs, offer some advice for a trade-off, which would cement bilateral relations between Britain and India, or as the documents suggest, to secure an even more close relationship with Indira Gandhi? Or even more sinister than this, contracts and exports worth £5 billion. And in the document it says, a positive response would earn a good deal of credit. A good deal of credit. Were the British prepared for the slaughter of thousands of Sikhs to earn good credit with India and secure an even firmer friendship between Margaret Thatcher and Indira Gandhi? The documents, the report, all suggest so. The documents would suggest that Sikhs in Punjab were left at the mercy of deadly, sophisticated, main battle armaments in a full-throttle deadly siege to secure Indian, British government, friendship and money. There are many holes that can be picked in this report. There's loads of holes that can be picked in it, and this video is only focused on some of the key arguments, some of the key questions that we need to pose. For instance, we can also look at the time frame and the time span of the report. It's so limited, it's untrue. It goes from February to June and maybe covers some of December 1983. If there was contact between Margaret Thatcher and Indira Gandhi, are we supposed to believe that these are the only bits of contact that were made? Would Indira Gandhi, it seems from the documents and the style of writing and the way she's talking to Margaret Thatcher, that she heavily relied on Margaret Thatcher's advice. We can imagine how much correspondence was going between the two, and even telephone conversations. These all need to come into the public. So there's many issues at hand here. Even the way the British press are reporting this, particularly the BBC, in many of their reports that Operation Blue Star and the British collusion in it, it was all about flushing Sikh separatists out of the Golden Temple. Not once did Sant Janel Singh Khalsa Bhindranwale ask for Khalistan. Not once. He said, if you give it to us, we won't make the mistake of 1947, we'll accept it. But for now, what we are saying to you is meet our basic human civil demands and we will remain in India like your brothers. Treat us like your brothers and we will stay here. That's a very diplomatic response and settlement from a man who was dubbed as the most ardent terrorist India had ever seen. So we need to look at the way things are reported. Operation Blue Star wasn't to flush out Sikh separatists because Sikh separatism didn't exist before Operation Blue Star. Operation Blue Star gave birth to Sikh separatism. Operation Blue Star created Khalistan, not the other way around. In any case, would this investigation in this report fill us with any confidence when it is led by somebody called Jeremy Heywood? Google the guy, and you'll find that he's got a very colourful past, and he's been involved in a lot of controversy, and the Iraq War is one of his masterpieces. And this is what the Telegraph has to say about Jeremy Heywood, the man who compiled the report on the allegations whether Britain was involved in the Harmandar Sahib massacre. This is what the Telegraph has to say. That Jeremy Heywood is blocking the publication of correspondence between George W. Bush and Tony Blair ahead of the Iraq War, together with later correspondence between Gordon Brown and Mr. Bush, thus effectively stalling the already heavily delayed Iraq inquiry. They further say, the blocking of the correspondence between Downing Street and the White House is an affront to democracy and prevents us from forming a judgment about the most disastrous war in recent British history. This is Jeremy Heywood, who is investigating whether Britain was involved in a Sikh massacre. Does this fill us with any confidence? Does this report mean anything to us? And just some concluding comments. This is by no means an exhaustive, detailed analysis of the report. We urge everyone to do their own analysis. But it's quite pertinent to note that when the documents were released, the Conservative British government were given ample time to respect Sikh feelings, respect the fact that we were hurt and reeling from these documents, and to give us something that could perhaps apply some kind of balm to our wound. What we got in return was a lifeless, flimsy, obnoxious report which has insulted us more than the original documents. We as a Sikh nation, and I'm sure Sikh organisations will be working towards this, will be rejecting this report and telling Prime Minister David Cameron that Sikhs categorically reject this report. We then move the government, and this is where we all come in, we move the government to go for an independent-led public inquiry. Now, such is the plight of Sikhs not only in India, but it looks like in Britain as well, that MPs like John McDonnell are organising a mass petition for people to sign so he can table an early day motion for a public inquiry, an independent-led public inquiry. Why should Sikhs have to go and do a mass petition and table an early day motion from sympathetic MPs for an independent-led public inquiry? That should be a matter of course, considering the gravity of this situation, considering how many lives were lost, how much suffering this has brought. So we demand an independent-led public inquiry, and we categorically reject this report. And we not only reject this report because it's flimsy, it's obnoxious, it's not detailed, and it doesn't contain any truth. In fact, it's more inflammatory than it does provide a solution. We reject it because in this year, Great Britain will be celebrating and commemorating the 100th year of the Great War, a war where Sikhs played a dazzling role, a war where Sikhs spilt blood for the British Crown, a war where Sikhs left their fields and villages in their thousands to fight for a country that they would never visit. What we ask is simply that you tell us the truth, that you give us the documents, and you are transparent. Not that it will bring any closure to us, but at least it will bring the truth. And just to finish, it is often said that history is written by those who hang heroes. And it's quite alarming to see how one person who physically embodied a repressed people's demand for human rights was painted as a terrorist, and a Prime Minister who subjugated the people of Punjab with repressive laws is seen as the saviour of India. But it's up to us to decide who the real terrorist was. And we'll leave you just with this one line from one of the documents in the annex of the report, and you can read this whole letter. It's a letter sent from Indira Gandhi to Margaret Thatcher on June the 14th after the Harmandar Sahib massacre. And it's a couple of lines and it's something to think about. She says, "We have a troubled situation in Punjab. Of all the malefactors, those who wear the religious garb are the most dangerous." She is identifying a whole community, a whole Sikh community, by their physical appearance and ultimately legitimizing their death as a result of it. If that isn't terrorism, the question is, what is? It is time for us, because history will judge our generation on these documents and how we reacted to these documents. It's time for us to tear down the lies. It's time for us to bring to book the people who have created these genocides and those who harbour them. And ultimately, we find a place somewhere in this world where Sikhs can live in peace and live free. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।